When you look at psychiatric drugs, let's say antidepressants or benzodiazepines, etc., they will knock down the target symptom of the disorder better than placebo over the short term for, say, 6 weeks. Sometimes there's not a big advantage, but generally they meet that hurdle. But when you look at how they affect people long term and what's happening to the brain, they have a paradoxical effect. So, and what I'm going to be talking about later today is how antidepressants, for example, it's pretty clear they are depressogenic agents over the long term. They actually they increase the chronicity of the disorder. With benzodiazepines, you see the same thing. Now, they're very effective in sort of alleviating anxiety for a couple weeks. But if you go down the road, you find out that people who stay on benzodiazepines end up much more anxious than, say, a placebo group. And so it's just paradox in the long-term outcomes where you get the opposite of what you think you're going to get. So antidepressants become depressogenic. Anti-anxiety drugs actually increase anxiety long-term. And probably the most surprising thing, and this would be the most controversial, but there's a real strong story in the literature that documents this, is antipsychotics actually change the brain in ways that make people more chronically psychotic over the long term. And that is a story that seems so totally contrary to everything we believe and know to be true. And it's certainly when I started this whole research, I was absolutely convinced of the other story. That antipsychotics were very effective, they were absolutely essential. And then there's this other story that stretches across 30, 40 years where they say, uh-oh, it looks like we're making the brain more biologically prone to psychosis. And you can say the same thing. People now are saying, well, why do people on antidepressants tend to have a very chronic course? And they're putting together a biological explanation for why that is. And what they're basically saying is the drugs ultimately have the opposite effect of what is initially intended. And it's because the brain is trying to compensate for the drug's presence.